Corporate responsibility for ethical behavior. This is an extremely important topic from exam point of view. Section F, ethics and the business ethics. It is now massively tested, so make sure you prepare this topic very well. Factors contributing to ethical behavior. First of all, we discussed in our previous lecture that a company can institute a strong system of internal control, and that to some extent can reduce the possibility of occurrence of fraud. But despite having a strong system of internal control, there is still a risk. So it is the responsibility of the company to make sure to eliminate as much risk of unethical behavior as possible. Why? Because there are many advantages of having high ethical values in the organization. If an organization has high ethical values, it will avoid legal problems. It might avoid bad publicity. Customers will be more loyal to such an organization. There will be more happy, satisfied employees. So despite having high ethical values, high level of morality, still employees might sometimes get confused what they should do in a particular situation. So organizations should have a formal written code of conduct that should outline what the employees should and shouldn't do. This code of conduct should be readily accessible to all employees, most probably available on the company's intranet or on the website. And I've seen some organizations, they have printed their code of ethics on the walls. So the idea is that it must be readily accessible to all employees. It must be written in the language that is easy to understand. And not only that, just having a code of ethics and code of conduct is not sufficient. There should be regular training and communications that the employees know what they are expected to do. So at least existence of code of conduct will enable employees to behave appropriately, ethically in complex situations where they are unable to decide what to do. Next concept is group thinking. Now this is an interesting concept. Let's say there is a group of 5 people, A, B, C, D and E. A very strong cohesive group. In such a situation, these 5 people, they become more committed to each other, more committed to the group than making the right decision. So perhaps what they believe to be the right decision may not be in accordance with the company's values. This could be extremely dangerous because group thinking often produces some extreme decisions. For example, B believes that such an action is inappropriate, but since he is a part of a group and he is very cohesively committed to this group, so he might make a decision that may be good with reference to this group, but that may not be in accordance with the company's standards. So basically, B would be making a decision so as to support his group members, so as not to disturb the cohesiveness or harmony of this group, but such decisions may not be ethical at all. Opposite to groupthink, we have diversity of thought. That is totally opposite to what we have just discussed. Diversity of thought means A, B, C, D, E, they all think differently. Greater diversity, there will be more viewpoints. So there will be higher probability that all relevant issues will be addressed because there is no group thinking. They don't think together like a single-minded individual. They believe things in a different way. They take things in a different way. So in such a situation, there will be fewer extreme decisions. In group thinking, you might expect some extreme decisions that may not be in accordance with the organization values. But in diversity of thought, when the individuals have diverse thinking, there will be less extreme decisions and there is probably more compliance with the company ethical code. Next, the IMA Statement on Management Accounting, Values and Ethics from Inception to Practice, published in 2008. This is an important document, important paper that was published in your student accountant magazine that you receive as an IMA members. It contains some important guidelines. It's a document for understanding ethical concepts in the organizational context. Basically, it's quite a detailed document, so we will be just trying to cover every aspect of it as much as we can. It is highly recommended that you should read this text fully. So what is the responsibility of the organization under this document? It says that an organization should have a written code of conduct. An organization should encourage a sense of ethics. A written code of conduct is essential because if no such code of conduct or code of ethics exists, employees will act whatever they feel like, whatever they believe to be correct, or they will just copy the behavior of what they see around. So a written code of conduct or code of ethics at least will specify how they should act. So behavior of your employees needs to be defined. It has to be in consistence with your expectations of the organization. So for this, a written code of conduct and code of ethics is highly recommended. A pervasive sense of ethical values. That's the next subtopic. This further emphasizes why an organization should have a written code of conduct and ethics. Because most of the organizations are now service-based, because the labor cost is now the major cost of many organizations, because the service sector is dominating across the world. Most of the economies, the dominant economies, the major part of their economy is a service sector. So for service sector economy, management systems, standard operating procedures, flow charts, how you should do your job, that is clearly laid down. Most of the employees, they know what to do. But what if some unexpected, some unplanned event occurs? What are you going to do that? What your employee is going to do that? So in most cases, the organization relies on the judgment of the individual, or maybe if you are facing trouble, you can ask your supervisor. So what if your supervisor is unable to help you in the trouble you're facing? So this is why it is important to have a clearly defined set of organizational values and code of ethics. So they will provide you a clear-cut, black and white direction you should take in a situation where you are unable to decide what you should do. So basically they create what you call the touchstones against which every unanticipated decision must be judged. Because if there is no code of ethics, if there is no such touchstone, it will lead to inconsistency in decision making. You will do whatever you want, I will do whatever I want. Because there is no clearly defined code of ethics, we will act according to our own personal code of ethics. So in the worst cases, unethical or fraudulent behavior will become pervasive in the organization. Next, distinction between ethical and legal behavior. First of all, you need to be very clear on this. Ethical behavior is not about abiding by the law. Following law is not ethics. Ethics go beyond the law. Why? Because ethical behavior is driven by values. And values are something that go way beyond law. We discussed in our previous lecture that management fraud involves manipulating financial numbers, financial results. So when such managers are booked under the law, they believe that whatever they have done was for the best interest of the company. They believe whatever they have done, that was a right thing. What made them say that? Because they followed their own particular code of ethics. Their own personal, every person has his or her own personal code of ethics. And according to that code, they act. So this further emphasizes why a company should have a written code of conduct and ethics. Because employees should have a clearly defined boundary what they should and shouldn't do. Like for example, we are in a country where taking and giving bribe is not punishable under the law. Right? So if an action is taken against an employee who has received bribe, there is no legal remedy. You can't do anything because taking and giving bribe is seen acceptable. Let's say it is seen acceptable in that country. So what you as a customer or as an employee or as a supplier do in such a situation where it is perfectly legal to take and receive bribe? So the only course of action you as a customer, supplier or a banker or a fund provider have is to either pressure the government to make bribery illegal, or you may decide not to do business with such an organization at all. Right? So that is why ethics go beyond law. Where the law fails, ethical code will help you take the right decision. Next is leadership by example. Yes, or what you call the tone at the top. Okay, now let's take an example. We have a board of directors and the CEO, that is a bunch of crooks. So what do you expect? If there are crooks at the top, what you will see, of course, a completely destroyed sense of ethics in such an organization. There is no ethics. You will do whatever you like because the senior are doing whatever they feel fit. So it's such an organization where the senior management, the board of directors, the CEO, when they are behaving unethically, the subordinate management will do the same. So the tone at the top plays an important role in determining how the organizational ethical environment will unfold. If you have good ethical people at the top who have set an example for themselves, for others to follow, you will see ethics being followed down the line. Every single individual is responsible for behaving ethically, and they will behave ethically when they see the top management is ethical. No matter how strong, how effective code of ethics you may have, people will look up to the board of directors. They look up to CEO. People will tend to believe what they see, not what you force them through code of ethics. So if you want your code of ethics to be effective, then you have to make it work by setting a good example. The top leadership should act. The top leadership should set an example for themselves. If they do, then the subordinate management will behave accordingly because they will do what they see. They will not do what you tell them to do. Right? So leadership by example. The senior management must act in a way that will make them an example for others, so others will follow. The concept of human capital. As discussed earlier, labor cost now is a major part of your operating expenses across the world. And of course, you would have noticed over the last 10 to 20 years, there is more emphasis on decentralization. Decisions are no longer taken at the center, while the decision making has been delegated to the subordinate management. And managers are now expected to take decisions within their domain. There is less supervision now. So now the thing is that since the decision making has been delegated, employees cannot be watched all the time. They cannot be controlled in every aspect of their work. So top leadership should create a climate and culture in which human skills can be optimized to the highest level rather than telling them to do this, to do this, to do that. They should have a sense of commitment and they need to do the right thing. Doing the right thing is what you call the main emphasis of the concept of human capital. Because if the employees are not motivated, employees are not committed, they will simply destroy the environment. They can have significant negative impact on the relationship with the company stakeholders, suppliers, customers, fund providers. So employees will behave the way they like. They have, as I told you, every individual has his or her own personal code of ethics. So they will act according to their own code of ethics. So if an organization has a formal code of ethics, that code of ethics must be used as a standard against which we will make a decision. Should we hire A or B or C? You should hire a person who has a code of ethics that is in accordance with the organization's code of ethics, with the organization expectations. Because if there is a mismatch between the personal code of ethics of the employee and the code of ethics of the company, this could result in divergence of thought and this will erode goal congruence. Organizational culture and behavioral values. Every organization has a unique culture that impacts the behavior of its employees. Culture, what basically is a culture? Culture can simply be defined as the way we do things in the business, the way we do things around here. Every organization will have a unique culture. Smaller organizations, their culture will be heavily influenced by the owner managers because smaller companies are owner managed. Owners are managing the business. But in large organizations, in which shareholders are the owners, they appoint certain individuals to run the business on their behalf. So in that case, there is clear divorce between the ownership and the control. Owners are way outside the company and the business is being run by few people appointed by the shareholders. So there is a divorce between ownership and control. So in such large organizations, what we believe the culture to be present, the actual culture will be totally different, right? It would be quite different from what we believe what the culture is compared to what the culture employees experience, what clients experience, what suppliers experience. In other words, upper management perception of culture, what they believe to exist, may not be really so. So in this situation, the step one in establishing an ethical climate and ethical culture must be an assessment of the existing organizational values and culture. That is the foundation on which you can set up a code of ethics and code of conduct. Employees training. Well, having a good code of ethics, good code of conduct is not enough. You need to train your employees on the importance of ethics. Employee training is an important aspect to maintaining an ethical organization. Not you and me, every individual member in the company should receive ongoing training, starting from the top, and the effect will ripple down to the lowest levels within the organization. So what should be included in training? We should not simply tell them these are the ethical codes. We should explain to them the issues behind the ethical action. Why should you act this way and why you should not act that way? What is the consequence of not behaving this way? So you need to explain to them the issues behind the ethical action so they know why ethics are important. We have two methods of monitoring ethical compliance, to what extent our employees are following code of ethics. The first one is the human performance feedback loop. It involves regular employees review, at least on an annual basis, to assess how employees are performing against the code of ethics. We can track the employees' performance against the ethical training requirement. For example, if we hired 100 employees, out of those 100 employees, how many have completed the orientation? Or how many completed annual refresher training on ethical conduct? How many have scored a satisfactory performance on ethics? Number of employees who were awarded for performing good ethically. So this is how we can evaluate how the next one is survey tools. Regular surveys are very valuable tool for assessing the ethical performance. We can create surveys on organization code of ethics and we can ask employees how well they think the organization is following the code of ethics. We can rank them, the question on the scale from 1 to 5 or from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Do you believe that the ethical code is followed? Rate from 1 to 5. Do you believe that the ethical code is being followed? From strongly disagree to strongly agree. So the results become the basis for developing our ongoing compliance program so that we can encourage employees to follow the code of ethics. Next, a whistleblowing framework. What basically is a whistleblowing framework? Let's say if I'm an employee in the company and I see that something wrong is going on. Some employees in the warehouse, they are selling inventory. Even senior management is involved. So whom should I report to? In most of the larger organizations, there is a confidential framework where employees can report any unethical act that they see and they don't want to disclose themselves, so they can anonymously report any wrongdoing to the appropriate officials through this whistleblowing framework. This is what you call the whistleblowing framework. So if an organization has such a whistleblowing arrangement, such a hotline, employees can report a wrongdoing to the appropriate officials. Large number of occupational fraud cases are detected through such a whistleblowing framework. Existence of such a whistleblowing framework will also enhance your system of internal control. So we as management accountants, we need to ensure that such processes are in place, such whistleblowing framework is in place, and that this framework is operational and it is fully confidential, because employees, they don't want to come into the open. They would like to report something going on which is wrong, but they don't want to confront the management. They don't want to put themselves in trouble. So we as management accountant, we need to see that such a whistleblowing framework is in place, it is working, and it is working on fully confidential basis. Next, ethics in the international context. Now this is interesting. See, If I'm living in country A, you are living in country B, since we are in different countries, we have a completely different set of social norms. We have different religions, we come from different backgrounds, so we will view ethics differently. We are from dissimilar backgrounds. Values, ethics, morality, virtue for you is different, for me is different. Right? So this can cause trouble for the organization that operate on an international scale. Like in most of the Western countries, they have successfully separated church and state. Church and state have successfully been separated. But in most of the South Asian countries like Pakistan, India, in the Middle East, church, not we won't call church, but our religion and our state, they are more or less integrated. So the ethical dynamics there are defined by the state, how the businesses should act. But in our part of the world, religion plays a major role in defining what is ethically right and wrong. So on international context, firms should try to clearly define the expectations of ethical behavior from their employees, because if there is no such distinction made, you should expect some unpredictable results. Then we have ethical behavior in internal controls. Fine, we know what internal controls are. We discussed this in detail in our CMA Part 1, Section A. A strong system of internal control. What are internal controls? It's a system of check and balance. Someone does work and someone else checks it. There is a policies and procedures, a communication system, reporting lines defined, management policies are followed, directions are taken, and so on and so forth. So we just don't want to go into that. If you want to institute a strong system of internal control, for this you need to have a strong ethical culture, because your internal controls will function over your ethical culture. So in other words, we can say a comprehensive framework of corporate ethical culture is a fundamental requirement to institute a strong, effective system of internal control. Now, under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, the CEO and the Chief Accounting Officer or the CFO, they have to certify, they have to attest that the system of internal control is in place and it is working effectively. So basically, they are putting their integrity on the front line by signing off the financial statement, by certifying that the system of internal control is working. Next is ethics and society at large. As we have discussed, that ethics not only affect our clients, our fund providers, our employees, our customers, but also the society at large, because we are operating in a large social setup. We are a part of society. As an organization, we are a part of natural environment. We use resources from the nature, and whatever we do, it results in some actions into the external environment, into the society in which we operate. So ethics and society, they can't be segregated. They must be viewed as if they are one, because whatever we do, it will affect the larger social environment in which we are operating. 3 tools to identify process control related to ethical and behavioral issues. First is the business process re-engineering. This is something we have done in your CMA Part 1, Section D. Here we just need to be focusing only on the ethical aspect. Organizations can be viewed as a continuum of different processes. Different processes working together is what a business is. So basically, an organization is a collection of different processes. So at each process, at each activity, there are some potential risks that needs to be considered. Like a purchase requisition processing or placing a purchase order to the vendor. So there are some risks involved. Perhaps the purchasing agent, he might ask the vendor to over-invoice or to under-invoice for his personal benefit, right? So we need to identify the risk at each activity, each process level, and how it can be controlled. Next is quality management. We know what is quality. Quality means the ability of a product or service to meet the customer needs and satisfy a customer want. So how quality management can be used as a tool to identify process control. Let's say our company has adopted a zero defect policy. Whatever we produce should be perfect as per the specifications. right? So which means any risk that can lead to mistakes in production from occurring must be identified and evaluated, and we must set up some control so that such event doesn't occur. So using this tool and considering risk from behavioral aspect can assist in identifying what types of controls should we put in place so that to achieve a zero defect policy. Third one is the continual process improvement. Simply, it focuses on the concept of learning organization. Organizations are learning, they evolve with the changing circumstances, and that requires changing in the organizational ethical dynamics, like hiring new employees or adapting itself to competitive pressures. So continuously evolving and learning from the changing environment is the cornerstone of continual process improvement. We continually monitor and assess the process performance, and we identify what are the changes that might be required. So potential process management and control issues will be identified and improvement can be made accordingly. Next, the last section of this subunit is the corporate social responsibility and sustainability. What is corporate social responsibility? Corporate social responsibility is the responsibility a company takes for having an impact on its stakeholders. There are different stakeholders: customers, suppliers, employees, fund providers, regulators, external environment. How are we taking the impact that we cause to such stakeholders? How much responsible we are? How much willing we are to behave ethically, legally? This is what is covered in the corporate social responsibility. CSR focuses on creating more positive impact on its surrounding and minimizing as far as practical the negative impact. CSR is accomplished through the core values of the organization through philanthropic programs. It is not legally required. CSR is not legally required. This is the idea that is deeply rooted within the company. What is sustainability? The literal meaning of sustainability is that ability to meet your current demands without compromising the needs of the future generations. Like if you cut 10 trees, you plant 100 more. That's what you call sustainability. You are meeting your needs but without compromising the future needs of the future generation. So sustainability focuses on the long-term vitality of the business. It involves maintaining trust with the local communities, showing concern for the environmental issues, dedicating the resources of the organization to mitigating environmental concerns. Yes, this point here important. CSR and sustainability reporting can either be done separately. There could be a separate CSR report, or it could be integrated with the annual financial reports. Next, major issues addressed by CSR and sustainability reporting. Taxes. A company should pay its fair share of taxes. It should be included in CSR. Environment. A company should evaluate its impact on the environment, carbon emission, pollution, noise. So the impact on the environment, and a company should take measures, should show what measures has it taken to reduce its impact. Human rights. Company takes the responsibility to ensure that human rights are respected throughout the whole value chain. We will not take our materials from those suppliers who use child labor. We will not sell to those countries that are being run by an unconstitutional takeover or some dictatorial regime. Corruption. A company would refrain from engaging in any corrupt activities which are harmful to the democratic values and fair competition. 4 levels of CSR. It can be best visualized through the help of this pyramid. As you can see at the bottom, we have economic responsibilities. Economic responsibilities, they are the first and foremost. A business has to be profitable in order to sustain, ensure that it will survive for a long run. It should provide return to its financial funds provider. Next, a company should obey the law and operate according to the rule of law. It should not ignore gray areas. It should not only follow the law in letter but in spirit as well. Then the ethical responsibilities. Organizations should not merely follow the legal obligations. It should go beyond the law, beyond the legal requirement. Should behave more ethically, even the law doesn't require you to do so. That's where the complexity comes in. Sometimes to be ethical costs money, but you are willing to spend money just to meet your ethical responsibilities. And finally, the philanthropic responsibilities. Companies earn a lot of money while operating in a particular social setup, so you need to return something to the society from whom you have earned. You have caused harm to the environment. You have caused harm to the society in the form of noise pollution, congestions on the roads. So now it's your time to pay back to the society from whom you have made money. So companies should strive to fulfill all these four levels. But unfortunately, balancing these could be complex because you might want to provide a higher return on investment to your shareholders and be least interested about philanthropic responsibilities. This is difficult to make a balance, but organizations should strive to fulfill the responsibilities at all these four levels.